a change in their taxes owed until they started making $1 million, because on net, with the tax decrease that they're having for the first half of their income, their tax bill would actually go down. And this is better illustrated on my handy dandy petition, which I can pass around later today. I'm going to dive in just a little bit more into some of the proposed uses of this money. So for education, we want to increase teacher pay and increase teacher competitiveness. For healthcare, we want to replace some of the Medicaid funds that we know are going to go down in the next few years. Support services for older adults and long-term support services, which we know are some of the costliest pieces of Medicaid. And then for childcare, we want to restore CCAP and help families afford childcare, including paying childcare providers more. So, where are we in this process? As you can see, I do have my petition, and so we are officially in the signature gathering phase. The last time that we tried to put a graduated income tax on the ballot, we arrived at the signature gathering phase on March 13th, 2020. And so we did not make it on the ballot because of other issues. Our last day to submit signatures to SOS is the first week of August. So we really want to make sure that we get a sufficient number of signatures by mid-July. Because we are striking a sentence from the Constitution, we do have to collect signatures from at least 2% of registered voters of all 35 Senate districts. To pass the measure, we would still only need a 50 plus 1% vote, but because we are changing a piece of the Constitution, we do have a higher barrier to entry to actually getting on the ballot. So, if you are interested in being part of this effort, you can collect signatures yourself, you can sign a petition, you can donate, or you can join an event. We have a website, and we also have some handy-dandy QR codes that I'm sure will be sent out after this. You can sign up for petition carrier training. I just went to my church this morning and filled in all 40 signatures of my petition, which was great, so I have some new ones. You can also donate or bring this presentation, this exact one that I'm giving right now, to your community, your book club, your church. I'm happy to go anywhere, and we have many presenters that are available. All right. I'm happy to take any questions now or later, depending on what is best in the schedule. Great. Senator Snyder.
Thank you very, very much, Caroline, for your presentation. But I'm a little confused because we passed a measure saying any changes to the Constitution required a 55% voter threshold. So why do we not have to meet that, given that Tabor is part of the Constitution and we're amending that?
That is a great question. So that is true if you are adding language to the Constitution. If you are striking language from the Constitution, you only need a 50% vote.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do these extra taxes go to the general fund? Because that's one frustration that I have with the taxes is just like we get a lot of money we raise for like building new schools, we get more money than we need, and now we've got this extra money that we could use for other programs, but we can't. We gotta give it back. So does this go also to the general fund?
That's a great question. So yes and no. So the actual logistics of getting the money, it's going to go into a separate fund that is exempt from the Tabor cap, which is an important piece because if we raised all this money, almost all of it would have to be sent out in Tabor refunds anyway, because it would smash through the cap. However, because the acceptable uses of the funds are relatively broad, and the two biggest pieces of the general fund are education and healthcare, and both of those can be used for this money. It is creating space in those programs. So it doesn't directly go into the general fund, but it supports the two biggest things that we spend general fund dollars on. And unlike, for example, marijuana money, it is not overly prescriptive in terms of what you can actually use that on. So we can use it for teacher pay. Unlike the cannabis dollars, we can only use that for capital construction of schools. And that was actually in the ballot measure. But we are trying to be prescriptive enough without being overly prescriptive and tying our hands, because we don't want to end up in that situation. Yeah. That's a great question. And really it's because the administrative burden of just checking to make sure. So for certain programs, the eligibility has to be checked every month or every 6 months or every year. And so the added number of people in the Department of Human Services and in the counties, because the counties are actually mostly in Colorado, the counties administer a lot of those programs. They will have to hire a number of additional people to be checking for the work requirements of these programs that previously did not have work requirements. So that's one of the big differences, is some of our programs do have work requirements, and so they already have people trained in checking someone's W-2 or someone's 1099 and making sure that they're working the amount that they have claimed they are working. But especially for programs like Medicaid that have not had work requirements in the past, they're going to have to hire a bunch of new people and train them on how to do that. Yeah.
They also have to rewrite the song.
Yes.
Why are we dancing around the issue, and why aren't we attacking the taper cap and getting rid of it?
That is a great question.
All the solutions are.
Yes. The question is, why are we sort of dancing around Tabor and not actually dealing with the Tabor cap? Because the Tabor cap is what I kind of mentioned at the beginning. It causes us to be in a structural deficit because the Tabor cap does not grow fast enough to keep up with population growth, caseload growth, and inflation. And so really in Colorado, we have two big problems. We have the problem of the Tabor cap, and we actually do have the problem of revenue. And in the last 5 years, it may not seem like that because we have busted through the cap basically every year for the last 5 years. But we have to remember that since we passed Tabor, we have only had a surplus a third of those years. So we do also have a revenue problem in the state. And so there's a lot of, and also the problem of single subject on a ballot measure is that it's really hard to deal with both the cap and revenue at the same time. But in this measure, the money is de-Bruced. It is exempt from the cap. And so it doesn't solve the underlying problem of the cap, but it does create over $2 billion of de-Bruced revenue. So.
So, SB 26-135, state public K-12 education.
Yes.
How might that interact with this? Or can you speak to that just briefly? I think it's something that probably most of us haven't heard about.
Yes, that's a really good question. So there is also, this actually answers your question a little bit too. So right now, there is a referred measure moving through the legislature that would de-Bruce education dollars from the cap, meaning that education dollars would not count for our Tabor cap. And if that were to pass, it would mean we would have probably many, many years before the cap would again constrain our spending here in the state. It is an interesting interaction between the graduated income tax and the de-Bruce for education. We are really hoping that we can make the case for both of these measures being really important. However, the graduated income tax is the only measure that increases revenue. And so that's something that's really important that we've been trying to make sure that people understand the difference, is that although we do have a cap problem again, we also really do have a revenue problem that is going to get worse as as a lot of the HR1 rules that were put off to 2027 and 2029 really start kind of rolling down. And so we're kind of waiting to see what happens with 135, and I think whether or not it actually gets referred to the ballot, so whether or not it passes through the legislature, we're going to have to probably regroup then, because having both of those things on the ballot could be an issue. It could not be an issue, but we'll see. Yes, yellow shirt and then red shirt.
Can you repeat the question?
Yes. The question is, what other revenue solutions have been proposed to deal with some of the fallout from HR1? So this is kind of the broadest base solution that we've come up with. We have also thought about things like a net investment income tax, which is a tax that is only on income that you make from investments. We've thought about things like, is there a way to tax second homes or vacation homes for people that don't live here in the state? But a graduated income tax, because it also brings us in line with what other states are doing, is really the largest and simplest thing to do that we can do right now. But there are lots of other things that we can think about, and hopefully in the future we'll be able to do more. And yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, the intent of this, because if you remember the tax where the middle class is really the hardest hit here in Colorado, the intent of this is really to keep the tax increases to those making $500,000 a year or more. And what locks that in, and I hate to use this as a crutch, is Tabor. Legislators cannot decrease those thresholds or increase those rates without going to a vote of the people. And so we actually would not be able to increase taxes on the middle class through a tax rate increase without asking all of Colorado to approve that. Yes, so in terms of the migration, the tax migration, we know that research shows that on net, when you look at like 10 years of this research, the migration of high net worth individuals is very, very negligible compared to what the investments actually get spent on. And so we know that in places like New York and New Jersey, who have implemented graduated income taxes, and also other states that have graduated income taxes that are not high tax states like Virginia, the net migration of taxpayers is not associated with implementations of those taxes. Many states that have graduated income taxes have had those since the inception of that state's tax code. And we also know that Colorado has a lot of other reasons for why people want to come here. We have a huge population boom, almost, for the last 10 years. And really over the last 40 years, our population has grown. So we're not really anticipating that would happen here in the state, especially because our top marginal rate would not actually put us that far out of line with what other states are doing. Don't worry, we're not going as far up as New Jersey. They're a little crazy over there. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, definitely.
I
Oh, sorry.
A question to Senator Snyder's, maybe the constitutional
Yeah.
mechanism.
Mm-hmm.
So I take your point that 50% plus one, you can strike something.
Mm-hmm.
You can strike the line about having the flat income tax.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you de-Bruce all the money that's raised purely from striking elements of the Constitution? Do you not have to add something to allow that?
You do. So part of the measure includes a de-Bruce of that money. which other measures that have raised revenue in the past have actually forgotten to add that and have to come back the next year to ask voters to debruce that money. So that part is actually in the measure. It doesn't debruce the general fund. It just debruces the dollars that are raised.
You're adding text to the Constitution to that.
Oh, sorry. The debruce does not add to the Constitution. It's just statutory. You can debruce something statutorily. Yeah. Just as long as you're not actually changing the Tabor cap that's in the Constitution. So as long as we're not taking out the language that says you have to have a cap on your revenue, which we're not doing. We're just debrucing that individual money. Yeah. Yeah.
So I do have something maybe you could explain to everybody. The total tax incidence in a state. Colorado has one of the lowest, if not the lowest, in the country. So you look at, Texas doesn't have an income tax, but their total tax incidence is higher than
Yes.
Colorado's because that makes it sales tax, property tax, all manner of other taxes. So I think it's important for us to understand that we are perhaps the lowest taxed state right now. Do you have any
That's
numbers on
definitely
that?
true for property taxes. For property taxes, we are the 4th lowest in the country. And that might seem surprising because I'm sure a lot of your property taxes have increased in the last few years. And that is not because the state has increased the tax rates or the counties or the districts have increased their tax rates. It's because the value of property here in this state is skyrocketing. And so yes, you are right that in terms of property taxes and income taxes, we are relatively low. I think we have one of the lowest income tax rates in the state, and this would actually put us at the lowest income tax rate for the bottom 20% of earners in this state, because it would decrease to, I think, 3.7%. But yes, in other states that don't have things like income taxes, they rely heavily on their we like to say that state taxation is a 3-legged stool of property taxes, sales taxes, and income taxes. So states like Wyoming and Texas that don't have income taxes end up relying really heavily on things like property taxes and sales taxes. And because we have a relatively weak income tax leg of our stool, because we don't have a graduated income tax rate, we actually rely a lot on local sales taxes. And so even though our state sales tax is 2.9%, which is one of the lowest in the country, local sales tax rates tend to be higher. And those also tend to be the ballot measures that people vote on. That we have increased the sales tax rate, for example, in Denver, I think almost every election in the last few years. And so when we have a relatively weaker leg of the stool, the other legs of the stool really have to make up for that.
Does everybody know how much money the state collects in property tax every year? 0. And so, back when we saw this after Gallagher got repealed, which was the hard ratio between commercial and residential property tax, we put in some good measures to tamp down the growth of assessed value and property tax rate assessments. That expired this year. We have new measures coming in next year. So we're currently in this unfortunate gap year where a lot of people who are getting their assessments from the property tax officials in the county are seeing some pretty significant increases. I wish we had the foresight to figure out how we could have avoided this situation, but there are measures coming in place next year which will lower the ability of property taxes to rise as they have in this current year. Is that you say that's correct?
Yes, that is correct.
I have another question.
Yeah.
As a gentleman asked early in the questions, so we're going possibly, if this were to pass, we'd get $2 billion in additional revenue. Would it be dedicated to the 3 topics that such as that money could only be spent there?
Yes.
But then what about the, I don't want to call it bait and switch, but, then are we going to fund those programs out of this new money? Would that allow us to spend the other money that's currently budgeted for those things in other areas, or would we hold fast and say we can't decrease spending in those areas.
Yeah.
I'm just curious.
The measure doesn't have anything that says you all can't increase your spending in those areas. However, I will say that, again, the two biggest areas that we spend in the budget by far are healthcare and education. And so by allocating all these additional dollars to those two areas, it's not really, I can't see a world where then suddenly, unfortunately, the Department of Natural Resources gets, $500 million out of that spending, just because almost 2/3 of our general fund is spent on education and healthcare, and that's only going up. Yes.
So you had said earlier that you anticipate a further $3 billion cuts to Medicaid, and we're only getting an extra $2 billion.
Mhm.
How much are we going to be able to help rural health?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so what the anticipated cuts to Medicaid that are coming are a lot of programmatic changes that are anticipated to happen all the way through 2030. And they don't phase in all at once, right? They're $3 billion in cuts across basically, now like 6 years-ish. And so what we're really hoping is that as we continue to raise $2 extra billion a year, so it's not just $2 billion one time, it's $2 billion a year, but the $3 billion is across several years. And so we're hoping that for now, that kind of stems some of that tide, but we're also hoping truly that at some point, some of those changes that were made in H.R. 1 do get reversed federally. Yeah.
So, Mike said, everything I was to do with this, what would happen with this impact? What would the situation look like?
The situation would look pretty bleak. Like I said, we did have to cut $1.2 billion from our budget last year, and we're cutting $1.5 billion from our budget this year. And this includes things like reimbursements to family caregivers. So if you have a disabled family member, you can, through Medicaid, you can get paid to take care of that family member. And we are cutting back that program very significantly this year. And I know that's one of the big things that is changing in this budget. So it's one of those things where we don't have a lot of meat to cut in our budget in the first place. We have a relatively small state budget compared to other states of similar economies and populations. And that is in large part because of Tabor, because the cap has really prevented us from growing a lot of the services that the state could offer. And so we don't have a lot of meat or fat to cut. We're cutting right to bone. Even last year we were cutting to bone. This year we're cutting to bone. And so we will continue to see cuts probably in the billion-dollar magnitude if we don't do something about revenue very soon. We would continue the CCAP freeze. So right now we have a freeze on our assistance that we send to counties for low-income childcare providers. We would continue that freeze for several more years, which is already hitting counties really hard. We would probably have to not increase teacher salaries or things like that. I know that we're stopping the phase-in of our new school finance formula this year, and that new school finance formula was supposed to create a better balance and incorporate other things like how many at-risk students you have. So when the state sends school districts money, it takes into account a more broad range of factors and can help out school districts that are struggling a little bit more. And I know that we will probably have to pause the phase-in of that new school finance formula. So it's things like that. It's programmatic cuts to real people. It does require legislation. No, I'm just kidding. Yes, so every year the budget is passed in something called the long bill, which is a very long bill that has all the budget line items. And so it does have to pass every year, but we also have to balance our budget in every state. We're not like the federal government. We cannot incur debt. And so we really do have to pass a balanced budget every year. And that means that our spending has to come and equal with our revenue. So.
Just a comment. 47 states are required to have a balanced budget.
Exactly.
So you make a good point that the federal government doesn't have to have a balanced budget. Isn't that a really big problem?
I would say yes.
What is the debt just go to, 38 trillion?
Yeah.
So I realize that HR 1 and some of the other activities at the feds have really put Colorado in a hole to some degree. And I think part of that is because we weren't planned ahead, so we tie our state income tax to federal taxable income, and that's hurt us. The fact that we had to accommodate 18 months of change in one fiscal year made it especially troubling. But I think we have to be realistic that I think some of our problems come from the fact that we used one-time money, COVID relief and the billions that came out during that time to stand up very worthwhile programs. But, one-time money does not make a good source for maintaining and sustaining a program. So I think where some of our problems are coming, we're a victim of our own success. We expanded Medicaid coverage where over 95% of Coloradans had health care coverage. But that expansion, when you start getting these federal pullbacks, hits us even deeper than some other states. So I don't know if would you say that's pretty much true, or?
Yeah. Yes. And I would also say that I think for Colorado, because we are such a unique state, I think it's really important for the people of this state to be able to fund the programs that we want to fund, which were very worthy programs that were expanded during COVID, with our own dollars, because we can't rely on the federal government anymore. And I think that we've seen that very clearly in the last 8 years, 16 years. And so I think that really makes a good case for 195, because it is bringing us in line with what other states are doing. It is giving 95% of the state a tax cut. And it is also raising the money that we need to fund the things that we know you all and we all want. So.
Thank you for all the information. You may have mentioned this earlier. What percentage of our state budget comes from federal dollars?
So the general fund, no money comes actually into the general fund from the feds. But in the total state budget, I believe it's about a third comes from federal funds, and about a little more than a third is the general fund. And then we have cash funds, which are a little less than a third. So it's about a third. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think. Yes. Yeah, in the back. That's a really great question. So the question is, if this if this measure faces too much opposition, where would we be willing to make concessions or changes? So, unfortunately, because of the way that citizens' initiatives work, we cannot change the language that is in the ballot measure right now. So ballot measures, when they are a citizens' initiative, meaning that we are collecting signatures for them, we have to go through a process at the title board, and we are assigned a title that includes all of the details of the measure in the title. And so once the title is set, we cannot change what is in the title. And that's because when we're gathering signatures, we don't want to gather a signature from you, and then the title changes, and then maybe you actually don't want that to go to the ballot anymore. And so it is a safeguard, but it does create a very long process of iteration where if this does not pass because there is opposition and we want to change it somehow, we will have to wait until the next cycle or the next election when we can do that. Because this is making tax changes, we can put it onto the ballot right in 2027, because in Colorado you can vote on tax changes every single year, not just on even years. But the process of standing up a ballot campaign is very labor intensive and expensive. And so it's really important that we do get the chance to ask voters about this measure this year. And when you sign the petition, which I hope everyone will, you are only asking to put it on the ballot. You are not actually approving it at the time. So you still have the chance in November to say you don't want it anymore. You've thought about it a little bit longer and you actually don't want it. So this is really just a process of actually getting it onto the ballot. It's not saying that you are going to vote for it. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that question. So the question was kind of what is the process of figuring out what we are going to put on the ballot, and how do we figure out what the opposition will be? So that's a very long process of focus groups, conversations, polling. So our apologies if you got a lot of polls. But this is a situation that anyone who's really doing a citizens initiative, if they want it to be successful, has to go through that really, really long process. And like I said, this is not the first time that we have asked to put a graduated income tax on the ballot. We did have a campaign set to launch in 2020 when COVID hit, and that process also had a very long iteration of stakeholder conversations with families and friends, polls, focus groups, and so it is a long process, and it is kind of confusing unless you're like actually in the world of it. But we just basically ask people's opinion on a large scale. Yeah. Yeah. The title is not 35 words long. So the actual title on the measure. I think so. I actually am not sure about that question, but I do know that one of the things about this measure, because it raises revenue, is that it does have to start with "shall taxes be raised" in capital letters. That is actually from Tabor. That is how it has to start. Yeah.
The second part of my question was, what do you think the opposition is going to
Oh, thank you. I'm sorry. A lot of things that have actually been raised here. How do you make sure the money is going to be spent the way that you're saying it's going to be spent? How do you make sure that taxpayers don't leave the state? How do you make sure that other types of taxpayers are protected in this measure? And so it's not much different than conversations like this, is figuring out where kind of that opposition lies, because I think most people, unless you're just like, I hate taxes, don't ever tax me. That's a little harder to broach that conversation. But a lot of people have very similar shared concerns about things like taxes. And that's like across a lot of different types of people, across political affiliations. And as a policy manager at a tax policy organization, I can say that it is a lot of similar concerns across many people. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. that's a good question. Yeah, that totally makes sense. So, for context, last year, what we did was we changed some of the rules around a program that we have called Healthy School Meals for All, which is our universal school breakfast and lunch program. And the way that they originally funded that program in 2022 was limiting the amount that high earners can itemize in their taxes. So when you do your taxes, you get to reduce your total income by things called deductions. Most people here probably take the standard deduction because it's pretty big. But if you have expenses beyond the standard deduction, then you will itemize your deductions, and that will reduce your tax base or the income that you're actually taxed on. So that's what that program originally did. Last year, because the program ended up costing more because so many people were using free breakfast and lunch, which is great. We want people to use free breakfast and lunch. They went back and asked voters if they could limit the itemized deductions even further. And so that actually starts at $300,000. When your income is $300,000, you are now in Colorado limited in the amount that you can itemize on your taxes. This is slightly different in the sense that it is changing the tax rate. Yes. And ours starts at $500,000. And unlike the Healthy School Meals program, that is kind of immediately, it starts as soon as you make $300,000. But the way that graduated income taxes work is it's on the marginal dollar. So when you make $500,000, your $500,001st dollar is subject to that increased tax rate, but all the dollars that are under $500,000 are actually subject to those lowered tax rates. So even Nikola Jokic, his first $20,000 or whatever the threshold is, $25,000 is going to see a lowered tax rate. So it's similar, but slightly different in the actual mechanism. Yeah. Yeah.
So, I think we figured out the percentage of Colorado taxpayers that receive free.
Yes.
And what is that?
It is 95%. But technically 100% because everyone's income under that amount will decrease. But I don't say that because marginal tax rates are confusing. But yes, 95% of Coloradans will see a decrease on all of their income. And then that 5% will see a slight increase on those additional dollars of their income. That makes sense. Oh, yeah.
How many signatures do you need to get this initiative on the ballot?
Great question. We need 125,000 signatures to get this on the ballot. We are aiming for 200,000 because there are lots of little things that people can do to make their signatures ineligible, or they register for the wrong address, or they use their nickname instead of their real name. So we're aiming for 200,000 just to be safe, but we need 125,000.
Where are you at right now, currently on signatures?
That's a good question. I actually don't know. We just started signature gathering a week and a half ago, so I know we have thousands of petitions currently in the field, and we have about 1,200 turned in, and each signature packet has 40 signatures. So if anyone wants to do some quick math, around like 40,000. 40,000 signatures. Yes. You do. You have to be a registered voter and a citizen to carry a petition, and you also have to be a Colorado voter and a citizen to sign a petition. And I found that out when I tried to badger my friend who's from Canada into signing, and I forgot that she's from Canada.
Well, Caroline, I speak on behalf of all of us, thank you so much. You know, I sit on the Finance Committee, and she is an expert testifier, comes in on many of those bills, and we're really glad to have you down here explaining what's pretty complicated. But
Thank you.
maybe a round of applause for our guest speaker.
Thanks so much.
And Carol, I don't know what the IBEW's policy is on getting signatures
have
within
to
the
stand
building, so
outside.
you might want to clear
I'll
it with
ask.
Mr. Thompson before.
I will. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
And Bill, and Bill, your first question was, why don't we just scrap the whole Tabor? Real quickly, you know, Tabor passed on its third time on the ballot on their fourth attempt to actually get it in, and that was '93. Half a dozen or more states followed right behind us. Every one of those other states have repealed their Tabor version. Voters in Colorado, they like Tabor. They like the fact that you have to go to the voters to increase taxes. They like some of the other provisions of it. So I think when you look at repealing one little portion of it like that, we really have to unwind the complicated measure that it is. And that's what I think they're trying to do with this current effort with 195. But, you know, voters have spoken time and again. They like their Tabor.
All right, thank you, Caroline. That explained a lot to me. We're going to move into the legislative part, and I'm going to ask, starting with Senator Exum, if you can just give us a few minutes, talk about what you're working on right now, what you're excited about, maybe some of the big bills that we might be hearing about, even if you're not the person that is on those bills.
Everybody hear me okay? Okay. Oh, that's much better. Thank you. Thanks everybody for being here, and thanks Carolyn for the presentation. Just a few things that I'm working on. This week, the Home Act passed and was signed by the governor on Wednesday, so we're happy about that. For the people that don't know about the Home Act, it's about increasing the opportunity for affordable housing for universities, nonprofits that have unutilized land and they want to be involved in an affordable housing project. It's limited to 5 acres, but it's a good bill, and we're hoping it's going to increase true affordable housing in our state. And like I said, it was signed into law by the governor on this past Wednesday. I did a sunset bill in committee that continues the fire suppression system program. So if you have fire suppression systems in a building or in your home, it has to be certified by a plan review and a physical inspection. So that's very, very important because, and many of you know, I'm a retired firefighter from Colorado Springs. Fire suppression systems work 95 to 97% of the time. And what that means is that the fire suppression system sometimes will get the fire knocked down and give the firefighters an opportunity to get in there to wrap things up. So it's a very important bill. I don't know why a program like that would sunset, but that's part of what we do just to make sure it's working properly. The next bill coming up was the CDPHE nursing fund bill, changing the use of that fund a little bit to help education, help pay some tuition and continuing aid for nurses that work in our nursing home facilities. Very, very important opportunity because in that field of work, it's a lot of turnover. So we want to encourage those nurses that do a fantastic job of taking care of the elderly in our community, which I'm fast approaching. Yeah, I hear you. The last bill I'll talk about is the Homelessness Prevention Act program. This is an existing program that helps individuals that are kind of on the cliff of becoming homeless. There's an application that they fill out in DOLA to get assistance. And the current program had an advisory committee that only met once a year. And so pretty much what the bill does, it just changes that to allow the executive director in DOLA to look over that program to make sure those individuals that have applied for help to get that assistance in a more efficient manner. And that's all I have. Mr. Snyder probably knows more about what's going on generally than I do. I have tough enough time keeping up with what I'm doing. But the long bill is coming. It will be in the House not this coming week, but the following week. And then they'll send it over to the Senate. And the way it works sometimes, the House will make some amendments, the Senate will make some amendments, and then the JBC gets the chance to bring all those together to where they make sense. And as you know, we don't have a whole lot of money to spend on legislative bills, so we've been told by JBC, if you bring a bill to the Appropriations Committee and it doesn't have zeros on it, they will kill your bill. So that's how serious it is this year. We're still able to do a number of pieces of legislation that doesn't cost. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm Amy Pascal. Can you guys hear me? Okay, doesn't sound like it to me. I am your representative for House District 18, which is where you're sitting right now. I'm going to tell you a little bit about stuff I've been working on. Try to keep it to the most interesting things. As Senator Exum mentioned, we pretty much don't have money, so we've been told all your bills need to be zeros, and almost all of mine are. So that has, in some degree, directed our ability to make changes. So my first bill is about county commissioner redistricting. So you might be aware that 2 years ago, 3 years ago now, when we redistricted our county commission districts here in El Paso County, our county commissioners appointed themselves to be their own redistricting committee. And that was legal at the time. So my bill says you can't do that anymore. So it puts in place an independent redistricting for counties where you have commissioners that are elected by the members of the citizens of the district. There are a number of counties that elect at large, but for ones where the districts matter in elections, this independent redistricting commission is required. Working on it with Senator Snyder. We are getting real close to getting that one across the finish line, so I'm pretty excited about that. I also have a bill that has to do with memory care institutions, facilities, and what it does is it requires memory care facilities to fill out a standardized form that describes exactly what their services are, the cares they are, what they cost, what their training is, how they handle things like restraints. And the point of this is so that hopefully folks that are shopping around for memory care have a little bit better time comparing different facilities. And so they have a little bit better idea of what they're getting. This one comes from a bit of a personal place for me. My mom has been in a memory care facility, and my parents have been in several assisted living facilities, and I know how difficult it is to shop for those facilities. So this will make it a little bit better, I hope. I also have one that has to do with interlock devices. What those are is a DUI interlock device is a device that you can put in your car, and you blow into it, and you have to be below the legal limit in order for your car to start. So we already have this program in Colorado, but this bill expands who gets to take advantage of the program. So it expanded it to folks who have gotten pulled over as a suspected DUI and they refuse to take a test. Currently, they have to wait 2 months before they could use an ignition interlock. Now they can use it right away. It also expands it to first-time DUI offenders. And the bill also expands the financial assistance. And we were able to do that without costing the state any money because we are putting that financial assistance onto the vendors of interlock devices, and they were okay with that. So we were able to make that work. I have a number of transportation bills. I sat on the Transportation, Housing, and Local Government Committee. We had a summer interim committee where we produced some bills as a cross-chamber team, so it's House and Senate, and it carried a couple of those bills. Probably not super exciting to most people, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail. You can certainly look on the legislature website and see all my bills, or you can ask me about them if you're interested in them. And another bill that I am working on with Senator Snyder, which is a big bill I'm sure a lot of people are interested in. It's SB 26022, and it has to do with creating a path for municipal utility to be able to apply to the Air Quality Control Board for extension for the time they need to hit their required emissions reductions. So all utilities are required to reduce their emissions from 2005 levels 80% by 2030. And Colorado Springs Utilities is struggling to hit their goals. We have closed one of the coal plants, Martin Drake. We've added in solar farms. We've done power purchases with wind. So that means we're contracting with wind farms that aren't actually in the county. And we have put in a multi-phase gas turbine. We also have peaker turbines that can kick in at short notice to try to even out the production should we need it for times when the solar and the wind is not producing electricity. So we've done all those things, but we're only at 44%. So we've got a pretty far way still to go. And at the same time, CSU has gotten approval from the City Council, who is their board, for increasing electric rates. They're going to increase 40.5% between 2024 and 2029. So our rates are definitely going up. Colorado Springs also is the county with the highest number of people on the LEAP program, which is the federal income assistance, electrical income assistance program. And we also have our own program as well. So Colorado Springs Utilities is feeling in a bind. And we have been trying to figure out a path because, of course, the one thing they need to do to reduce their emissions, if they closed Nixon coal plant today, they'd be in fine shape on their emissions. But we need the power from that plant. So what do? So that is what we have been working with CSU for, seems like years, but I think it's only been a few months, to try to find a path for them. That bill is still it's introduced in the Senate, but still hasn't gone to its first committee because we are trying to work something out. And the governor's team has gotten involved because he has another bill coming, or actually it's being carried by Rep. Wilford, so she gets upset when I say it's the governor's bill. but it has to do with setting targets 2030 to 2035. So this is all getting involved in that as well. So they've been working with the governor's team, the Colorado Energy Office, the Sierra Club has gotten involved, and we're trying to figure out a path forward. Do we want to say anything more about it at this point? Nothing's hard and fast yet. So the one thing they have said that is, I guess, hard and fast is that they will close Nixon by 2035 drop dead date. 34, end of 34. December 31st, 2034. To me, that's 2035. But they are targeting closing it sooner, by 2032, probably the end of 2032, I assume. But we're still trying to work out details, and so we don't have anything more solid than that. What I've been pushing for the whole time is we need to have a plan that I can see how you're going to get there, and I believe it. And we also need to have some kind of enforcement mechanism so we're not back here again with the same story 5 years from now. So we're still trying to figure it out. It's a complicated one. And that's, I think that's, I have one more bill that you might want to hear about. It has to do with computing devices and sending an age signal to apps. It's a framework to tell apps what age bracket somebody is that is using that app. It's passed through the Senate. I have concerns about some of the details of the technology in the bill, and so we have been gone back to stakeholders and been working on trying to figure out a less invasive way to do it. Right now, the bill requires everybody to sign up for this essentially on a computing device. My goal is to make it opt-in only. It's something that parents could opt in for their kids, and we're also going to be excluding open source software because it just doesn't make sense to be able. There's no way to enforce that. So those are a couple of things that's happening with that, and I'll send it on to my fellow representative, Rep. English.
Thank you. Can you all hear me well? I'm Representative Dr. Regina English. I represent Colorado House District 17, where my friend Senator Exum used to lead. And I will give you a few different bills. And again, like Rep. Pasco said, you can feel free to go to the Colorado General Assembly website and click on Find My Legislator, and you can see all our bills that's coming. I am a business owner, and I do sit on the Business and Labor Committee, and I also serve on the Health and Human Services Committee. I had a bill that I've been running for the past 3 years, and it is protections against child rape. And this session, we wanted to start it in the Senate to see if it could get some traction, but it didn't. It was postponed indefinitely. So we just have to figure out what we can actually do to protect kids against rape and maybe take a different approach. So I was very disheartened that we changed chambers and it still didn't get across the finish line. So again, that bill is postponed indefinitely. But this week on the 31st in the Health Committee, if you would like to come and testify, but you cannot come in person if you're not able to ride up I-25, because it is a treacherous drive sometimes, you can go online and testify virtually. But I have a Family Stability and Kinship Care Act that's going to be heard in the Health and Human Services Committee, and it's dealing with parenting time disputes. It's prioritizing kinship placements in certain circumstances, facilitating post-adoption, hopefully inclusive to grandparents. I'm still working with the counties on some pushback that they're giving me, but the work will not stop. So again, that bill will be heard in Health and Human Services on the 31st. I'm also working on a safety program for students and it's concerning initiatives promoting safer schools. I took it upon myself to tour schools across Colorado Springs so I can actually hear from students and what will it take for them to feel safe in our schools. They talked a lot about bullying. They talked a lot about cyberbullying. They talked a lot about mental health. They talked about knowingly that some of their peers have weapons at school on their person or in their backpacks because they're being bullied on the way home, and that's the only way they feel like they can protect themselves. But again, they're scared to actually tell someone, and then I don't know, kids don't want to be called snitches. But there's some issues we need to fix here within our public school system. So I'm definitely working on that. Going to continue to have conversations with our students because their voice is definitely important. And me coming from the Board of Education for 4 years for Harrison School District 2, prior to being elected to the State House, education will always be a priority for me at the State House. I also ran a sunset substance abuse treatment program licensing bill that passed the House and is now over in the Senate, and is modernizing definitions when it comes to substance abuse. And we have an opioid issue here within our state, so that bill is actually dealing with a lot of that. But again, it's basically modernizing the definitions and making sure that there's a framework still within the state for people to get the wraparound services and things that they need for addiction. I have a tenant data information policy that is actually on the floor tomorrow, second reading, so we'll have debate about that. There will be some amendments coming, but what that looks like is positive rent reporting as well as redaction when it comes to eviction, and we're trying to work some more aspects of the bill, but that'll be heard tomorrow on second reading on the House floor. And I also was on another sunset bill for combative sports office and commission, and that's just to make sure our athletes that are in combative sports, we can have that commission still in place to ensure their safety, particularly boxing, kickboxing, those real physical sports like that. So that passed successfully. Also, I ran a transparency of chemicals used in hair products, and the Gov's office recently wanted to add relaxers and some different products, and people say, is that an important bill? And I say, absolutely it is, because there are toxic chemicals in the products that we use, and a lot of these chemicals cause cancer, and they affect women's reproductive system. So yes, it is absolutely an important bill. So now it's over in the Senate because it passed the House. So we are confident that it's actually going to pass the Senate as well. One of my bills, right out the gate, it was in my 5 priorities, is measures to improve Black maternal health equity. However, the long title is concerning measures to improve equity in maternal health. Having conversations with the governor's office right now because it is currently in the Senate with my friend Senator Exum and Senator Benavidez. But this bill is particularly important to particularly the Black community, because we know that Black women are dying at higher rates than anyone giving birth. Our babies are actually dying more than any other race of kids that are coming into this world. So this is a very important policy, because when Black mothers are respected and listened to when we have pain, and we share that we have pain and we're actually listening to, it can not only save lives, but I believe when Black mothers are honored and respected and listened to, all mothers are honored and respected and listened to. So that is concerning measures to improve equity. Thank you. Thank you. It's in Senator Exum's hands, y'all, so I believe he's gonna work it and get it passed to the to the Senate without a doubt. And lastly, just a few other bills that I'm running as a prime sponsor over in the Senate. There is a bill dealing with reporting of lost or stolen livestock, because our friends here that run Freedom Acres Ranch have been dealing with their livestock being killed, their livestock being stolen. They've been dealing with some harassment. So these are real issues that we truly care about at the state capitol. And being the chair of the vice chair of the Black Caucus, is really important that we make sure we are protecting our community and protecting people that look like us. It's not that we're not protecting all people, because we are, because that's what legislators do. But when there's someone in our community that's in distress, like Freedom Acres Ranch, it's very important that we level set and make sure that we can set some safeguards in our community to ensure they don't have to experience what they're experiencing. And Senator Pelton, he's on that policy, along with Senator Coleman and myself and Representative Sukla. So it's a bipartisan effort, because we do know, I particularly believe, I'm not a legislator that, runs for office and say I'm going to do bipartisan work. I actually do bipartisan work for real. I believe thank you. I believe bipartisan work is fair work, because that means we all can agree on what we need to safeguard the state of Colorado. And we're also running, it's a police accountability bill, and what that bill is looking like right now is still in the works. It's going to actually start in the Senate, but when the police actually murder someone, they don't get to investigate themselves. It must be, thank you. It must be a third party, and there needs to be a different level of accountability, transparency, and oversight. And if you're investigating yourself, some of that can be compromised. So we just want to make sure the lives that have been lost and the families that have experienced this trauma, we can again put safeguards around what it looks like when someone is actually murdered by the hands of the police. And lastly, I'll just talk about a little bit. It's called Cradle to Career Grant Program creation. So, of course, it's actually creating a grant for young people starting in elementary all the way up to high school to create access and opportunities for them to be successful. And I will pause there, and this is a great work. It's a great call that we have as legislators. Sometimes you can't make everybody happy, and sometimes we're not going to all agree on things, but at the end of the day, I think we all just want a better quality of life, and sometimes that looks different for all of us. But I'm here, committed to this role, committed to the job, and it's an honor to serve. Thank you.
Pretty impressive group I'm up here with. So I'm on somewhere around 30 bills. I'd have to ask Christy what the latest count is, and I'm going to go through every one of those with a fine-tooth comb in detail. No, and and most of my bills are technical, legal, boring bills. A lot of times. So I've served on the Finance Committee and the Local Government and Housing Committee. I'm vice chair to Senator Exum, who's the chair of that committee. I served several weeks on the Judiciary Committee when Senator Lindsay Doherty had her baby. And now I'm serving on the Education Committee since Senator Michelson Janae has resigned from the Senate. So it's a pretty heavy load right now. But that's what I signed up for. So I am Mark Snyder, Senate District 12. Welcome. And so I'll just go through some bills quickly. Senate Bill 009 was one I ran that's already passed through, basically protecting our 501c3 charities here in Colorado. The current administration made a lot of rumblings about maybe pulling their 501(c)(3) status for political reasons, and we want to protect our great nonprofit community from that type of stuff. It was not a new invention of the current administration. This has come up in the past, especially during the Obama time. That was also an issue that was raised. But we just want to make sure that our 501c3s can continue to raise funds and get the support they need and not be subject to whatever administration's political agenda might be. let's see, Sunset Fire. I was actually on that bill with Senator Exum, but he being a 35-year firefighter who retired as a battalion commander, and me being no experience at all, I was pretty much just there for moral support on that one. I have a local government approval bill says whenever a publicly or a utility company wants to put transmission lines across the county, they need to get local government approval for that. And that's happening out in eastern El Paso County. It's an issue. It's not a non-controversial issue, but that's one we're working on also. I've got a newspaper delivery bill, which is going to be heard this week, basically classifying the newspaper delivery folks as independent contractors. There's some problems with the way the Denver Post does it. They do it with a third party they hired to handle their delivery, and I guess they had some problems there and they didn't pay their people correctly. But this really, for the Gazette to the small papers all across Colorado, independent contractors, you know, they pick these papers up, deliver them either to paper boxes or to people's driveways, and we want to make sure that they're classified as independent contractors. I had one with monument placements for surveyors. It basically allows if the monument point would be in a roadway or a public right-of-way, a dangerous situation, it's a provision that allows them to still set the monuments but not risk their lives, and really doing it with modern GPS and other tools that we have. I had one post-occupancy agreements. That's when a house is sold from seller to buyer, but the seller needs to stay in longer, and that was being subject to some of the new landlord-tenant rules that we have. It's really not a good fit, so we're just making clear it's a separate type of transaction. Had one lock boxes for schools. So many schools and school districts already do a great job. Others don't have anything like that. So really we want to have these boxes are every bit as safe as a gun safe, and have that attached somewhere unobtrusively on the outside of the building, so if there is an event, that fire personnel as well as police and others have not only access to this box, but it has all the keys, key cards, a schematic of the school, really help them out in that way. And we have it all fully funded through some of the 123 money. Let's see. Rep. Pascal mentioned the redistricting. I've got some recovery cash funds. I was part of a bill that would have created a trade commission with Ireland, but it never made it out of the House. And I'm not sure exactly why. I have to admit I don't really dig into the House bills until they're on third reading and look likely to come over to the Senate. Let's see. I have one for destination management companies. These are companies that arrange for conferences and retreats and that kind of a thing. And it's a taxation issue, really, but they're really important. They bring a lot of business to Colorado, and there's some discussion about how they should be taxed, whether at the time that they purchase goods for their clients or at the time they bill their clients. We're just trying to clarify that they already pay income taxes on anything they make, but that's just one we're working on. I've got one in the careless driving space. I ran a bill last year with Senator Carson. We did some work in that area. It's really become a huge problem in Colorado. We have more pedestrians and bicyclists hit and seriously injured and killed. And so we're trying to see what we can do. There's another bill that's working its way through the House right now. It won't be heard till April 8th. Covers a lot of the same areas, so we're trying to fit it hand in glove. The problem is it has vehicular assault as in there as possibly being proposed to be a Class 5 felony, and we've got a fiscal note of approximately $15 million. They're saying it's going to put possibly 983 more people incarcerated in DOC, so we'll probably have to drop that part of it out. But we are really trying to continue to do this. Trying to increase criminal penalties in the current legislature is a challenge. And I understand a lot of that. I was here for the great changes in 271 and some of the criminal justice reform that we did, but I think we have to recognize there's going to be, when you do such a big sweeping bill like that, there's going to be parts that don't really work out. And I think we have to recognize that and realize there are places where we need to have, stiffer criminal penalties, frankly. I've got one that's for wildfire. It was a bigger bill, but now it's down to just creating basically a tax-free savings account so that folks can use that money to improve their resiliency with hail and wildfire. So instead of trying to create a new fee on insurance policies, which is what we've done in the past, this would just allow folks to create these policies. And it's particularly important now because a lot of people's deductibles are going up. They're changing the way they do that now to not just a set amount, $2,000, $4,000, a percent of your property's value. So this will help people to put some money away tax-free to make improvements to their property, to protect from wildfire, and also to allow them to meet that ever-growing deductible. I have a right to repair bill, which is a little bit controversial. Colorado's a leader in the country right now. We have done great things allowing mainly consumer and consumer servicing industries to get the codes that they need and the passwords, the access, in order to get in and fix this ever increasingly complicated electronic world we live in. But in Colorado 2 years ago, when the last bill passed, inexplicably the word consumer was taken out of that bill, so it's left a very gray area. Generally, when it's business to consumer, 100% all for that. But when you get business to business, there's other security. So basically, we're trying to create a standard exemption that every other state that has a right to repair has. It exempts critical infrastructure from that. Let's see. Well, I'm proud to be a co-chair of the Arts Caucus, and so we ran an Arts Caucus resolution recognizing all the wonderful artistic endeavors we have in the state of Colorado, and we aren't able to get them any funding this year, but we're able to at least recognize them for that. I could go on more, but that's probably enough for now. I've got several House bills that are still coming over and starting to work through those. I also sit on the Uniform Law Commission, so I often run that. This year I've gotten passed through the Senate the Uniform Mortgage Modification Act, which is about as boring as it sounds, but it's a very much less costly and more efficient way for mortgage companies and borrowers to work it out. Somebody falls behind, maybe they lose a job and have to take a much lower paying job. Instead of having to refinance that or, God forbid, go through the foreclosure process, it just is a very uniform way for people to modify the mortgage. If they want to extend it out to further years, lower the payments, lower the interest rate, things like that can really make a difference. This would allow that to happen in a much more expedited and less costly fashion. I've got some others that I probably have some regret about. One is trying to address the what I think is an alarming increase in the potency of cannabis products, mainly with the edibles and the dabs and the shatter and all this other stuff, that we've gotten so far ahead of ourselves that I don't think we've really paid attention to the health consequences, especially to young people. And so it's a new way of taxing the excise tax, which is currently assessed 15% across the board on everybody. Instead, we would be looking to, and it actually would involve a ballot measure, we would tax cannabis on a sliding scale. The greater the potency, the greater the tax burden on that. So that's one that I just feel is important. We need to address that. We plunged into this great cannabis experiment, and like with the other things I mentioned, we have created problems, and we have to recognize those and address them. So I'm happy to talk about it. I know we have the CSU Senate Bill 22 out there, and there might be some more questions about that. I'm happy to get more in the weeds on that, but that's a good sampling of what I'm doing this year. Thank you.
All right, we've got about 30 minutes left of Q&A. I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. We're going to do kind of what we did with Caroline, and we'd like you to just project. And then if you have a specific legislator that you would like to address that to, just let them know. And so we'll do about 30 minutes. So you may not hear from each of them. So if you have one that's specific, because otherwise we'll only get 2 questions. Or I can bring the mic to you. So, all right. Gloria Martinez, I saw your hand up first.
Well, I want to thank you all for giving up part of your Palm Sunday and March Madness, because I had to give March Madness up too. This is for Senator Snyder. We know that the governor's wanting to add more prisons. We know that. But my feeling is asking you, with this, how are we targeting? Because I see more Hispanics and more blacks put into the system and not given a fair opportunity. So are we filling these prisons and are we looking at the law changing? How are we going to make Colorado an example that we're not going to go after minority men and women? Because I've seen it in my family and I see it in other people where they break the law, let's just get a traffic ticket. He didn't pay it, so then he goes back into the system. Then he goes back into the system because he didn't pay the ticket, so he goes to jail. And then he goes to jail and they tell him to go find a job and they won't hire him because he's been out and whilst it goes back and forth. What do you think that we can do to start preventing that if you want to really look at the prison system?
Well, thank you, Gloria. That's an excellent question. There's no doubt that minority populations, Hispanics, blacks, have a much higher incarceration rate, and that's something we need to address. The governor's proposing, I think, 2 new prisons for about $150 million. I've been this is my 8th year in the legislature, and every year we try to reduce the prison budget, the DOC budget, and we never get anywhere. It continues to just grow. I'm looking for solutions where we can reduce the prison population. I think there's some good work being done now to mainly look at older incarcerated folks that are, over 60 or whatever the number might be, who are much less likely to reoffend. We need to start thinking about that. We also need to have better job training and skill training for people incarcerated, because we don't do anything for them now, and when they come out 20 years later, they have no skills, and they often recidivate because there's no other option for them. I think there's going to be a big discussion about the prison budget and the governor's proposals. The governor proposes a budget, and then the JBC responds. It's a back and forth process. I think that's one that I think there's going to be a lot of pushback on. It's really hard to justify that. We only have 2 private prisons left in Colorado. I'm not a fan of private prisons. Some things don't lend themselves to the profit model. But I don't see how we're going to be able to get rid of those when we already are facing a shortage. One thing, and this might not appeal to the El Paso County Sheriff and others, but we have a lot of capacity in a lot of our county jails. And I think we need to start delineating who needs to actually go into the correction system and who can be handled at the jail level, and maybe get them out and into a better path forward by using that. But that's what I have right off, and I think Representative English has a response.
Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Gloria, for that question. But I do just want to put on the record, as a vice chair of the Black Caucus, when the long bill comes and DOC is part of the long bill, the Black Caucus often takes a no position on constantly funding DOC for the very reasons that Ms. Gloria shared, because it's black and brown people that are overpopulating our prisons. And just to add on to what Senator Snyder said, I was just arguing in the well maybe about a month ago when they were asking for money for more beds. But I don't believe that more beds should be funded. I believe that resources for wraparound services for people to get rehabilitated is the real answer, opposed to us constantly giving money to add more beds when we're getting ready to lose funding in other programs that we need, like the CCAP, the SNAP benefits, the Medicaid, all those things. Prison should not be funded like that. And the last what I'll say is, I don't know if you all know in here, but it's 56,000 somewhere around there per prisoner, and we're not even paying $12,000 per student in education. That's problematic. So this isn't a game, people. So whenever I take a position of no, I can explain my no clearly and unapologetically, especially when it comes to DOC and the prison system. But I believe that the elders that are in prison, you know, and some of them are on their deathbed. Can't they go home and die with dignity with their families? Why do we still have to constantly pay all this money when they can just go home? I think someone that's on an IV or hooked up to all kinds of machines, I don't see them coming out creating crimes. Do you all? Because I don't see that. But I just wanted to say thank you for that question, Ms. Gloria, and I wanted you all to know if you ever see something that I took a no vote on when it comes to DOC, that is why. But last year, Senator Exum was on the bill as well. We were able to get through a bill called Right to Visitation so that they can't use visitation as a disciplinary action against people that are incarcerated because it impacts their mental health when you shut them off from their family in the outside world. So sometimes we can do more harm than good, but we're here to do the good, get in good trouble and do the good stuff, and that's what I'm here for. Thank you.
Hello. Just a moment, also a personal privilege on that. The state should also look into automatic record sealing, not the ability for it to happen. If someone has been locked up for a period of time, they may not be aware to all the resources that are there. But if that is sealed and then that comes off of their record, that also helps with recidivism rates as well, too.
Hi, I'm Liz Rosenbaum. I'm your repetitive, really persistent PFAS fighter and environmentalist. So I would just like to thank you for your very thoughtful time on the CSU bill, because what always happens is where I live in the southern part of the county is where all the solutions get dumped and they turn into Superfund sites later. So I know that you want to shut down Ray Nixon. I drive by it, it's near my house, but there's also the solar fields out there that when they go away, who's going to recycle those? Or are they just going to rot into the landscape? So as you're thinking about these solutions, and we all want to shut down all of these coal-fired plants, I want you to remember that all of this coal ash is being stored back there behind a dam built on shale, right? So when our elected people are taking their time to thoughtfully do this, we need to give them the time and the space to do it, because none of the solutions are going to work. And if you want to build a nuclear power plant, I volunteer Flying Horse as tribute, and not my house anymore. We're done. We have a tire Superfund site where grants were cut off, 50 million tires built out there. All your trash goes to that landfill. Please continue to be thoughtful as you shut this down. And I want to know what the sticking point is for you as you're negotiating this, of how we can be helpful.
Well, this one comes up a lot. So, and I've been hesitant, and I think Amy also, as these negotiations are going on. And they're meeting weekly, a couple times a week with CSU, the Governor's Energy Office, some of our leading environmental groups like Sierra Club, National Resource Defense Council, and others. You know, when I was asked to run this bill back around Thanksgiving, I told them right away, okay, you have to show people your plan to get back on track. How are you going to hit the 80% goal in 2030? And a detailed plan. You know, and there's some folks in this room that are very helpful to me, sending me information. When they closed the Drake plant, It was a 180, 190 page report on exactly how they were going to do that step by step by step. They haven't produced that report on the Nixon plant yet. And so I told them, and I think Rep. Pascal told them the same thing, is you have to come forward with a plan, how you're going to get back on track. There's a reason why this bill hasn't been scheduled for committee yet, because much like Rep. Pascal, I'm not going to run a bill that doesn't have a plan. And so there's been a lot of movement. You know, the bill originally said keep it open till 2040. That's off the table. They've already agreed to the framework where they have a plan to close it by 2032 and replace it with renewables. There's things happening in that world. They're joining the Southwest Power Pool, thank you, which will open up many more opportunities for them to acquire clean energy. Right now we're still negotiating on that, but they've offered to let all of their bids and the plans and everything they do be reviewed by the environmental groups. We're still working on the details of that. Should that be yearly? Should it be monthly? I think probably quarterly is going to be the answer with that. The one thing that I think is still lacking is a little bit more holding their feet to the fire. So if they produce these quarterly reports and they're falling behind, they're not hitting their benchmarks and their targets that'll get them to, back on track, we need to have some teeth into that. And whether that is, more pollution controls on the Nixon plant, because believe me, and I know Amy doesn't either, we don't want this plant open one day longer than it has to be. And the people that down where you are suffering from the ill health effects from that. So I appreciate your sentiment. I'm glad that you recognize we are working as hard as we can. It's been an excruciatingly slow process, having to wait for these meetings to happen. I'm pretty much in touch with all the parties related, at least weekly, if not a couple times a week, keeping an eye on what's going on. I think we're getting really close to having a publicly presented solution that hopefully will I don't know if it'll satisfy everybody can live with. They may not love it, but I don't want to look backwards. I'm not sure why we got off track. We had a good plan when we filed the IRP in 2022. Something happened between 22 and 25 where we got off track. I'm just trying to look forward and get us back on track in a solution that doesn't jack up utility prices on our ratepayer, because we are a municipal utility. We can't just cut dividends to the big rich cats who invest in Excel and others. Anything that happens, I get a lot of emails from people. CSU, don't reward them for not sticking with their plan. I agree with that, but the problem is, what does that mean consequentially? It means that if CSU gets no relief and they have to go out and buy a lot of renewables, that cost is going to be paid on to us. We're a nonprofit municipal utility. So I think we're really trying to get this right. Thank you.
You're fourth. All right, I have a number system right now.
Oh, they got the
1,
microphone
2,
back there.
3, 4, and then I will come up there.
Great.
Did he just call me number one? Hey, I'll be short, not like Senator Snyder. Hey, for starters, Mark Thompson, I'm part of organized labor. And, there's been several labor bills in our capital over the past few years. And, we've got a governor who has a history of vetoing labor bills. There's currently an agricultural worker bill regarding the threshold on overtime. And I want to thank our two senators up front. They both stood with labor recently and voted against the bill that's going to raise overtime for ag workers up to 56 hours. And currently it's at 48. Now, who in here, doesn't get overtime once they hit 40 hours? And as my representative talked earlier about, respect and dignity, those workers work just as hard, if not harder, than most I know. And it is about dignity. It's moved over to the House. I'm going to ask the two representatives here today to take a good hard look at that. And I'll be chasing you through the corridors. And, you know, I can't catch anybody at the Capitol, but you'll have a tough time getting past me. And each of these legislators up front, they are great about stopping and talking to people, and I thank you for that. I believe it's Senate Bill 121 that's coming over to the House, and again, thank you to the two senators that stood with labor. Not a question.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, gotcha. Hello, everyone. My name is Anthony Kennedy. I'm currently a law student at DU. I don't really have a question right now. I just have a very targeted proposal that's currently trying to hopefully close a loophole that's facing evictions or tenants, specifically residential tenants. There's a loophole where big corporate law firms are able to basically take advantage of a very small loophole in the statute and provide forms that are not helpful. This doesn't allow for judicial efficiency. A couple of things. I'm prepared to make a presentation, but obviously I want everyone else to have their time. So if you guys could like stick around for a little bit, that would be awesome.
I feel better if I. Okay. Thank you for your service, all of you. Really appreciate what you do. So I have a question for each of you, I think, but I'll make it really quick. One of the first things that's on my mind, and I know this is so out of the pocket here, but when are we going to get rid of daylight savings time? For 2 weeks, there's more accidents. It just discombobulates everyone. And what I'm understanding is that the ski resorts and some of the hotels want to hold on to that. And so I want to figure out what it is that stops us from just having one time and not changing, every year. So that's one of my questions. The other, Tony, about Senator Exum, about the housing. I really thank you for that and having more land for housing. A lot of them are religious institutions. However, I just spoke to on my campaign now, talking to a constituent, is that Solid Rock, right? Pastor Ben gave up that property to have affordable housing. But what's happened now is that the rate goes up by 10% every year, even for the people that have just moved in there. Goes up by 10%, and their Social Security goes up by 2.5%. So we have to figure out how to address that. And that needs to be addressed also on City Council and on the Commission. Mark, in terms of the public utilities, the Nixon plant spews out 2,000 pounds of CO2 an hour. So we don't ever look at the medical cost and what's happening. And so it's not like a flip of the switch. So we've transitioned to gas, the aeroderivatives as they're called, but that's 600 pounds. It's a lot less, and it's a transition, fossil fuel. But it's really important because I was on the board that put that into effect, that we were going to close in 2030. But now it's become political. It is a political thing with that current CSU board, who are the current city council people, that want to stick it to the state legislature and to the governor, and they're using every means. And the problem with it being elected officials doing it is because they never don't want the rates to go up. But if we would have waited till now to close Drake, it cost $110 million. If we waited till now to close it, it would have been over $300 million. So it's not cost effective to keep Nixon open. And yes, hold their feet to the fire. Okay, rates have gone up, but we have aging infrastructure. But given that, we still have the lowest rates of the investment, power plants and our investment utilities. Okay. Amy, I had a question on the redistricting of the county commission. what's the timeline for that? And when do you think it could actually go into effect where there's oversight over how those lines are drawn? And so that's it. Sorry, I had a lot.
So that bill will go into effect immediately. So that, or, you know, upon the signature of the governor, then we have, I think it's 90 days where citizens can petition, but it will go into effect this year, and so the next time we redistrict, it will be in effect.
And most everybody probably knows who Yolanda is. Served 8 years on Colorado Springs City Council, was a voice for so many great causes. And if memory serves, you are actually running for county commissioner in District 5. So, we haven't had anybody but a Republican on the El Paso County Commission since, 1972 or so, 74? So, a long time. So, all right, so we passed a bill a couple years ago. We entered into a compact with other states saying that once we are all on the same page, we will make a definitive decision as to whether we stay with standard time or daylight savings time, one or the other, no more switching back and forth. But that was the compromise that was struck. Arizona seems to do it just fine. They don't want to put their cattle ranchers and milk dairy farms and others at, a disadvantage by switching the hours like that. It's a little tougher question than it might initially seem, because you go one way, kids are standing at the school bus stop in the dark in the morning, or you go the other direction, they're coming home in the dark. So there's other things to it, but we do have, we've entered into a compact. When other states act on it, this will go into effect. I don't know when that'll happen. And thank you for your comments on the Nixon plant.
All right, so we have another question, and as you all prepare your questions, please just be succinct and get to the questions because we're close to the ending of time, just so we can get as many in as possible.
Hold on just a minute. Hola, Ms. Yolanda. Regarding the village at Solid Rock, those that qualified for 38% AMI when that was built, I was not aware of this 10% increase. I will check with Pastor Ben on that, but thanks for bringing that up.
This is a question for Representative English. First, just a clarifying question. House Bill 26-1264 about protecting students. I want to clarify that bill relies on safe to tell for protecting students, yes?
Yes.
Just yes, okay. In my experiences with safe to tell, it has been mostly negative. One of my friends was subject to a safe to tell report that I believe was targeted as harassment, and another one of my friends previously was reported to safe to tell several times for suicidal ideation, and the support that she received was police officers at her house. And so I believe that safe to tell is not not the best way to support students in this way. I am not aware of alternatives, but I am curious if you have explored alternatives, and I'm worried about the use of safe to tell in this way.
Yes. Thank you for that question. The bill in its current form right now, it will not be that way. It's going to be a complete strike below, which means it'll be a completely different bill, because I did have conversations with the education lobby around safe to tell, and I did hear many students shared your same sentiment when it comes to safe to tell. So I believe there needs to be some work done on that. And so what the strike below will look like is the cyberbullying, the bullying, and the mental health framework using the same infrastructure that's currently in the schools, but the bill will look completely different. And if you want to track it, you can get my contact and we can have conversations if you have ideas or different resources you would like to see in the bill. Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you for focusing not just on the Nixon plant, but on the need to meet the 2030 80% goal. My question is, supposing that I'm not a ratepayer for Colorado Springs Utilities, live somewhere else in the state, supposing that my utility company I buy my electricity from has been meeting all of the clean air standards all of these years and presumably charging me more for that, supposing that it's still planning to meet the 2030 goals and will, of course, have to charge me more for that. What is there in Senate Bill 22 that would make me want to go to my legislator and say, vote yes on it?
Well, you raise a good point. I mean, people point to Excel and Excel's meeting their goals, and other utility providers are. You know, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. Many of these companies do not generate their own power. They're transmission companies, really. And so for them, it's a little bit easier for them to get, where they get their power is how they meet their goals. So they can go out and they're already buying energy. They don't make their own, generate their own electricity. So I think that's one difference right there. You look at Excel, a multi-state organization, about $16 billion in revenues every year. I think Colorado Springs Utilities about $3 billion gross revenues. But Excel has already gotten 2 waivers and extensions on coal plants. First, they got the Comanche down in Pueblo. Now, granted, that was only a year. And now they've also asked for permission to extend the life of one of the plants up north. So I think what we're seeing in this area is that it's, one size doesn't fit all, as I said, and that even the large providers who have the capacity, I mean, when you have 8 different states and that big of a budget, it's a lot easier to divert resources from other states that you have and focus on Colorado in order to meet your 2030 goals. But I think we're seeing already around the state different utilities are having different levels of difficulty meeting them. I really have no answer for you why we got off track from the 22 plan to suddenly we're in beginning of 25, suddenly they see they're not going to make it and they start looking for relief. Like I said, I don't really want to focus on that backward look. I don't know what that does for us. I want to focus on the future. I want to, get that coal plant shut down and ended right away, and that's what we're trying to do. We've already come down to 2032 to 20 May, as the target date. That's 3 years. 3 years longer than I would like, but I'm sorry if I'm forgetting part of your question, but I just want you to know that it's not like these other utilities are just hitting the mark and not having any trouble doing so. And many of those are transmission organizations. Like I said, for them, it's just where do they buy their power from? They don't generate any of their own.
Hello, my name is Gail Nels. I'm representing people on Medicaid, and I'm curious if we can work on the bills together that are going through on the non-emergent medical transportation bills. In the past, we had that brokerage and it failed. Where I'm looking at the bills now that are being running through the legislature and the committees, and I see a lot of problems with the data exchanges and how it's going to be implemented. We've seen HICPOP fail with other implementations on major projects, and I'm concerned what that means to the people of the state on Medicaid.
Well, Gail, we've been working on these transportation issues for a long time, haven't we? Yeah, it's appalling what we're finding out now that's happened up there with the Medicaid providers, the way they found some loophole, and basically it's costing us close to $300 million. A ride that should cost you $6, they were charging $96 or $76 for. I think there's a real push in the legislature to get, Burmeister, Kim? There's a lot of people disillusioned with how that program and that department's been being run. In fact, there's even an effort to encourage the governor to make a change there. Of course, that's his prerogative. But we've seen this in other areas too, not just in transportation, but a lot of the billing and the issues that we're facing. We're just in a time where our Medicaid costs, if unchecked and we don't bend that curve down, in another 6 years, it's going to take up every dollar of our general fund. So obviously we have to do something. And I think it starts at home. And if we've got mismanagement going on in some of these areas, we've got to bring it to daylight and, figure out what happened and how we prevent it from happening again.
So I also want to throw in there, I sit on the Joint Technology Committee, and so we review projects from state departments having to do with software and hardware infrastructure. And one of the other sad facts is that the software that they use for that system is in bad shape. And that is something we also need to fix. Of course, that costs money, but we are well aware that software is in bad shape, and they are working on it. There's actually a plan being put together to address that. And so that is, I think it's going in a positive direction. We're actually going to be recruiting software engineers to volunteer and work on this to help us save money. So there's some creative approaches going on there, but just want to let you know it is well understood that software is in bad shape.
I happen to be the bearer of bittersweet news. This will be the last question because we'll then let you all get home to your Sunday time.
Thank you, representatives. My name's Laura Howard. I'm a registered nurse. I'm an advocate with Healthy Air and Water of Colorado. I love Colorado. I want to see us be healthier. And with all these changes going on with the Drake plant and things, we have to make changes soon because our health is getting worse by the moment with asthma and all the respiratory problems and just everything. Are you willing to work with community groups and colleges and organizations, as you stated, Representative Pascal, you want to have a plan forward? What does that look like, and how can we be involved also so that we can move a little swifter so we can maintain our health? It seems like if we drag on, nothing will get done. But there's people out here that are willing to help. So I'll leave you with that.
Thank you. I appreciate that very much. I do think we are struggling a little bit with a dragging feet kind of situation. And I think we are getting Sierra Club involved. That's one group that's involved. And I think at this point, we're just having to put a hard wall that you're not going to slip through here without a real plan. And I think that's sort of where we're sitting right now, is to get that realization through. I like your suggestion of potentially getting more groups involved if they have some expertise that they can lend. So that's certainly not out of the question. I'm not sure what this is going to look like yet. This has been this whole process. I'll tell you, I haven't known where it's going from the beginning. But right now, I think our biggest focus is just making it clear that we have to solve this problem, because it seems like we have just sort of let it slide for a while, and that's not an option. We got to get that plant. I have asthma too. I mean, I get it, and it is spewing tons of stuff out. One of the concessions that CSU got in exchange for saying they were going to close the plant in 2029 is that they weren't required to put on additional what they call scrubbers. They have, I can't remember which one they have. There's nitrous oxide and sulfur dioxide. They have a scrubber for one of them and not for the other one, and they were allowed to not put that second scrubber on because it was going to close. So this is a very serious concern. I didn't know that when I first got involved in this, but I'm not sure exactly how we would get people involved, but I'm definitely open to that. Whatever we have to do to get this turned into a real plan that we can track.
And to the first part of your question, I think it's great. You're absolutely right. We have to engage with the young people in our community. That's who we're fighting for, is a better world, a cleaner environment for them. And so Rep. Pascal and I have met with, oh gosh, I don't know how many times we've met with CC students, UCCS, and anytime we flag a little bit, Bill McNally right here, make sure he brings a troop of young people up to hold our feet to the fire. But I mean, I think that's where we really get the buy-in and ideas for how we see the world 10, 15, 20, 30 years from now. And so we are constantly meeting with stakeholders. I don't think we've turned down a meeting with anybody. But thank you.
All right, well, with that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for their time for coming out on this Sunday. I'd also like to give a hand to our members. There are 45 days left in this session. Some of us are happier than others, but no one is more happier than you all are. Please always feel free to stay in contact with your members. Reach out to them. It's firstname.lastname.chamber, whatever the chamber they serve, House or Senate, at college.gov. Yes. All right, that's it. Thank you all, and get home safely.